Hi and welcome to the show. This week we're in Kigali, Rwanda, and my guest today is the co-founder and CEO of Entrepreneurial Solutions Partners, an advisory and investment group. He authored his first book, which was published by Wharton School Publishing. He's a young global leader at the World Economic Forum, was honored by the African Leadership Institute as a Tutu Fellow, as well as being named by Forbes Africa as one of Africa's 20 builders of tomorrow. He earned his MBA at the Wharton School and his MPA at the Harvard Kennedy School as a Mason Fellow. Eric Kakou, welcome to the Scoop. Eric, it's great to have you, my brother.
Thank you so much, Sunny.
It's good to have you here. Thanks for making the time.
I'm grateful for the invitation.
Eric, early years, we're here in Kigali. This is where you are spending a lot of your time. But you grew up you were born in the Côte d'Ivoire.
Yes.
And you grew up in Côte d'Ivoire.
Absolutely.
So where do you call home? You've lived in a lot of places around the continent. Where do you call home?
It's a difficult question. I would say Côte d'Ivoire is still home, though, because this is where my parents and my siblings live. And I've been fortunate to travel throughout the continent and have friends everywhere. But, Côte d'Ivoire is still home.
What was it like growing up in Côte d'Ivoire? I mean, what was the lifestyle like? What were your parents, living? Give me an idea of your family life at home, your folks. What did your dad do, your mom do?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad is actually a teacher, and my mom, worked at the bank at the time. So I was really fortunate to really have parents that were educated, who really sort of impressed on me very early on the importance of education. As a kid, my parents actually split. Which really, for me, was a challenge, but also a blessing. I think it became a blessing in as much as my stepdad actually is an entrepreneur.
So you stayed with your mom?
Yes, I stayed with my mom, and my stepdad is an entrepreneur. So that was really a sort of opportunity. So I guess that's where my interest in both learning and entrepreneurship comes from, I guess. So
and what about with your biological father? I mean, the relationship you have with him is still good?
Excellent relationship.
You still see? And with your siblings, how many siblings do you have?
As a matter of fact, I have 2 siblings on my mom's side, and I have another 3 on my dad's side. So it makes for a very big diverse family. With different talents. Some people are in sciences, others are in business. We have a musician in the family as well. So, that's very good.
So, any pressure from your parents in terms of what career path to follow?
I've always been able to actually make my own choices. What my parents really cared about was that I could actually explain why it was important for me to follow whatever path I wanted to follow. So as a kid, I wanted to be in the army, and then later on I wanted to be a medical doctor, and then I wanted to be an engineer, and then finally I set out really on business.
And what made you choose Wharton to go away to university? Why the US? Why not, France or,
It's a very interesting question, because the road to get to Wharton is actually a lot longer than it looks.
Just leaving
exactly.
Côte d'Ivoire.
So basically, after my high school, I had a chance, because my mom at the time was working at the African Development Bank, to have a scholarship, which allowed me to actually go and study in Canada. The reason why I picked Canada was because I was interested in business, and I figured North America was the place to go. Unfortunately, I didn't speak any English, so I was left with Quebec, which is a French-speaking part of Canada, right? Went to HEC Montreal, did my undergrad there. At the time, I still wanted to do a PhD. I finished my undergrad relatively early. I think I was probably 20, 21 years old when I finished. But then consulting firms came on campus. And what I learned from talking to some of the consulting companies that invited me to speak to them was that I would basically be paying to learn. So I figured, instead of studying another 5 years and have my parents supplement my income, I might as well go and learn and be paid for it, and in the process really grow. And I picked the company that I picked because it was the Monitor Group at the time had a practice which worked with developing countries. So I really had that sense that I needed to figure out a way to come back to Africa very fast.
So the plan was always to come back.
Absolutely.
Going away was to get experiences,
absolutely,
to understand and learn a little bit more about the world. But the end goal was always, I got to come back home.
Absolutely.
To the continent.
Yes.
What was it like living in a place like Quebec? I mean, it's a cold. Winters must have been brutal. Coming from Côte d'Ivoire, beautiful climate. What was it like adjusting and being a black African as well?
No, sure. I think the real shock wasn't just the thermal shock. So yes, the temperature was awful, and I remember December 26th, 1993, my first year there, talking to my parents on the phone and trying to convince them that everything was fine, when in fact I was, in my bed, in my long john cardigans and jeans and my coat, wondering what I was doing in freezing Montreal, you know? So those were really cold times. But I think the real shock was the difference that I saw in terms of quality and standard of living. You know, our countries, you know, in Africa are so rich, yet people are so poor. And then you look at places like Canada, which are very difficult to even inhabit, where somehow people have managed to create prosperity. So to me, that difference is what really shocked me.
A lot of other people I've talked to have very similar stories where they go and they visit all these countries, but they go and they look at what has been built.
Yes.
And they come back thinking, why can't we build this? It's not that we're inferior in any way. It's not that we have a different type of mind. It's not that we're not as clever. But why have we failed to build institutions, buildings, cities, sanitation that works, running water, electricity, all of these basic things?
So that is one of the things that forced me to write the book that I wrote. If you ask me, the reason why we have struggled so much is that we haven't really approached our challenges with the right mindset. I think our biggest deficit is not a deficit in infrastructure. It is a deficit in mindset.
Interesting.
Right? What I mean by that is we spend our lives and a lot of energy dealing with last-minute issues and problems and crises. And we don't necessarily use the power of innovation, the power of entrepreneurship, to really have a very dedicated approach to actually solve the issues that we face.
What's the best thing about Côte d'Ivoire for you, Eric?
I think the best thing about Côte d'Ivoire is really the education system at the time. So I had a chance, you know, growing up to do like a public school system. From primary school all the way to the time when I finished high school. And it was a system that was very rigorous. It was, you know, modeled after the French system. But for somebody that was really hardworking and really sort of tried to apply themselves, they had an opportunity to really get the best education ever. So for me, I mean, going to the high school that I went to in Côte d'Ivoire, like I look at Ivorians that have been to some of the top schools in the world, they all sort of go back to the same high school.
So the same roots of going.
For me, that type of education being provided in public institutions literally changed my life.
And what needs to change in Côte d'Ivoire, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the thing that has to change in Côte d'Ivoire is to really find a way to involve young people a lot more in leadership. So I really feel like African leaders in general need to figure out a way to share the burden. It's very difficult for any one individual in any one group of people to really preside over the destinies of millions of, you know, people. And I think that young people have a lot of energy, they have a lot of ideas. And sometimes the failure to really tap into younger leaders, you know, young women, young men from the communities that, you know, have ideas and want to do things, maybe one of the things that we have to address as a continent. And I think that's true for Côte d'Ivoire. I can think of a number of other African countries where that's true as well.
We'll be right back with Eric Kakou. Stay with me. Hi, welcome back. I'm here with Eric Kakou in Kigali, Rwanda. Eric, talking about careers.
Yes.
First job, once you said you had plenty of opportunity, but your first job, what do you remember most about the first job? And you can't have started at the top.
The challenge about my first job is that I was actually living and working in Toronto, which is an English-speaking city, not being fluent in English. I think I learned a couple of things from it. Number one, actually, instead of studying in Quebec, in French, I should have probably learned English sooner. You know, that's number one. So literally, any challenge you have, it only gets worse with time. So you might as well deal with it sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
But the second thing that I remember really was feeling really fortunate because it was an organization where there was a lot of training. So very early on, you know, we're sort of exposed to CEOs of big companies, and it was a very rigorous environment, which really which sort of gave me a strong work ethic as well, one that I had since high school. But I felt like this was really a step up, really. And I think I really learned a lot. Over a period of about 2 years, I worked on 12 different projects in 8 different industries, and worked in France and worked in the US and Canada, different companies. So up to today, I still use a number of the concepts that I learned about how some of those businesses work in the first world onto the continent, because I think that's something important.
Over the next 5 years, what would you advise young Africans in terms of career opportunities? Where do you feel Africa is going to grow? Which sectors are going to grow over the next 5 years?
I think it would be the wrong way to approach it, to have a sector focus. I really strongly believe that it doesn't matter which sector a young African pick today. I think what really matters is the type of mindset they bring to the sectors where they go. What I mean by that is, if you want to be in IT, great. Have the ambition to be the next Google, the next Facebook. If you want to be in, I don't know, fertilizers production, think about being Yara International. If you want to do agriculture, to me,
aim for the top, aim for the best.
Top, because I really strongly believe, everywhere, it's great that we are meeting here at the African Leadership Network, right? Where we have a very high number of, overachieving young Africans. And these are people that globally in what they do have done extremely well. And to me, the most important message I want to send to the young women and young men that are listening to this, look, the sky is the limit. The opportunities are in Africa. It doesn't matter which sector you pick. You will do well if you give it your best and if you worry about being world-class at what you are doing. And being world-class at what you are doing is an issue of discipline. It's an issue of ethics. It is really, making sure that you think about building something that will last, as opposed to looking for a deal. So sometimes you have to be patient. So to me, that's really what's really important.
Top 5 priorities for the continent. Where do we need to look in order to change things significantly? What would you say are the top 5 things that we need to change continent-wide?
Continent-wide. I probably won't give you 5. I think 5 is me. I'll just give you 3. I think first is education. But not education in really getting people to read and write. I mean education in giving people the knowledge that they need to be productive. And that doesn't necessarily entail sitting down in a classroom. Sometimes it's about the people themselves going on Google and researching every new word that they don't understand. It's about, reading books and literally sharing whatever ideas. I'm reading a book right now called Emerging Africa, written by a Nigerian author who is the vice governor of the central bank there. Fantastic book. I've read many books on Africa. One of the best I've read yet. Really making sure that we keep on educating ourselves. Because I think we treat education on the continent as something that the government has to do for us or provide. I think I'm talking about effortful learning, where people really go and self-learning. And yes, government has to help with the infrastructure, but the private sector can also get involved. And that's number 1, right? Number 2 is entrepreneurship. What I mean by entrepreneurship, I don't mean survival entrepreneurship, as in I need to make ends meet, so let me do a deal. That's good for the short term. What's important is to build businesses which have products and services that make sense, for which a high number of people are willing to pay a good price for. Those businesses are going to create jobs, they're going to solve problems, they're going to help with taxes, which will help the whole continent. I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing is really leadership. And on the leadership front, my belief is that we need a model of leadership that's really decentralized, where we are really tapping into some of the resources that are there in terms of human capacity that are not being looked at. And I think we have the impression that to be a leader, you have to be sitting in a big car and in a big office. I think to be a leader is about the choices that we make as individuals and how those choices impact the communities where we live. So, yeah.
What are your biggest accomplishments? What would you be most proud of in terms of what you've done so far?
That's a difficult one.
Writing a book, when you authored your book, how old were you?
I was, the book would have come out in 2010, so I was basically 34.
That's a pretty big achievement to have a book out when you're 34 years old.
Yeah.
Was that something that you're very proud of? Tell me about the process of getting this book out. What made you write it and why you wrote it?
This book actually came from a couple of places. I think the first part is really looking at what was happening and feeling like there was something important that we were missing. This issue of mindset. And honestly, in most of the conversations that we have about the continent's development, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about power, we talk about roads, we talk about big amounts of money. But we forget that no amount of money can substitute for a very good idea, for an insight, for a certain mindset. So for me, it was important to make that point. The second thing is I had a mentor who was actually the founder of OTF Group, the company I was working for before I came. He always sort of challenged, all of us at the company to actually write and, speak and share our ideas. And for me, it was also very sort of useful to have somebody like him that would really sort of keep on pushing and saying, hey, you have to do something. And then finally, once I kind of managed to sell the idea of the book to the
publishing house.
To the publishing house, and they gave me a deadline. I had no choice but to finish it. So I think for me, that's really how the process worked. But on your question about the achievements that I'm the most proud of, I would say it's really about people and the teams. I feel like I've been extremely fortunate. I mean, it's sort of easy to be sitting here talking about all those things that have happened. But everywhere anything happened, there were a large number of people involved. And for me, the most important thing really is being able to work with other people. So work with leaders that are much older, that for some reason sort of trust that maybe I can contribute something. Work with younger people, have colleagues. I mean, I have a fantastic team at Entrepreneurial Solutions Partners. People that literally, we had no money. For some of them worked for like a year without a salary. For me, all those things, that's really what to me is really important. I mean, I think it's less about the sort of accolades and the external achievement. It's more about that.
We'll be right back with Eric Kakou. We're going to talk about the future and Rwanda. Stay with me. Hi, welcome back. We're here with Eric Kakou in Kigali, Rwanda. Eric, before the break, you touched on ESPN, the company, and how proud you are of the people that have helped set it up with you.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit about what Entrepreneurial Solutions does in terms of building leadership. Because for me, leadership is still, while we talked about it earlier, it's still one of the biggest problems we have on this continent in terms of vision, in terms of the big men of Africa still running a lot of things.
Yeah.
How does ESP aim to change things? How about the other work that you do?
Okay, so let me maybe start with the other work.
Okay.
So why did we set up Entrepreneurial Solutions Partners? We set it up because it occurred to us that one of the main reasons, besides mindsets, businesses and countries were struggling was that they were missing the right combination of insights and money. I mean by that, if you have a whole bunch of money, no good insights, you just waste it.
Yeah.
You have a whole bunch of ideas, no financial resources, you don't go anywhere. So we set out as a team to really provide the right combination of those two things. So now, how do we do that? Very simple.
I love ESP. I love how I'm sure that was the plan, the way it works. ESP is a fantastic name, by the way. But sorry, carry on.
So basically, we have three practices. One of them really deals with businesses, whereby we are going to participate in the equity of a company, provide our sort of expertise, provide limited capital, raise a lot more, and basically work with the entrepreneurs to make the venture a success, not as consultants, but as equity partners. That's one part of it. The second part, which is very important, is really around impacting larger number of businesses. So for every entrepreneur we work with, there are going to be hundreds of thousands we can touch directly. So we select very strategic consulting initiatives, things like incubator, private sector development plans, etc.
That touches a lot of people.
Which touches a lot of people. Yeah. And those ones we will do them with larger sort of institutions, governments, etc. And then the third part is really touches on this issue of leadership. What we decided to do there was to establish a platform which we call Archimedean and Entrepreneurs. you know. It builds on this idea that Archimedes had way back when, you know, give me a fulcrum and a lever that's long enough, and with like one hand I can lift the world, right? How do you lift Africa out of poverty? You equip entrepreneurs with the right knowledge and connections to grow the businesses. So what we did is we launched this new leadership platform in Abidjan about 2 weeks ago. And the first class is about 17 entrepreneurs. Those were people that had won different business plan competitions at different stages in their entrepreneurial ventures. And we are really working with them to really change the way they approach their businesses. Now, beyond the businesses themselves, we also think a lot about the issue of inclusion, because you know, businesses can do extremely well and destroy society in the process. So what we think is important is to bring a mindset to business which recognizes that those businesses have to have a positive impact on society.
They have to have a sense of responsibility
Absolutely.
to society, which a lot of businesses don't have.
Absolutely.
But then working, I think one component that seems to be missing from what you've just told me is educating government on the importance of allowing a playing field, that of setting up a set of parameters that allows this type of business to flourish. Because many governments in Africa don't do that. It makes life very difficult.
Look, I think you make a very important point. I mean, yes, it's true that governments have a very big role to play. I mean, nowhere have we seen development without governments that were playing whichever role they were playing. The issue was always, what is the content of what they bring to the table? For example, a government that makes sure that it is actually safe, you know, to operate in whichever country, whichever, you know, city at any time of day and night. They should do more of that. A government that's really makes sure that, you know, you have a lot of capital that's available, so that interest rates at banks would be lower, or would create conditions for venture capital to flourish. They should do more of that. A government that makes sure that we have infrastructure, you know, power, roads, etc. That being said, I don't believe the issue is about teaching them or giving them reports or any of those things. I mean, most of the people in government have been to all the best schools, and they've read so many reports.
They know a lot of this
stuff. They know a lot of the stuff. What's missing is a focus, is a mindset, which is about delivering on whatever we know. So we have a lot of knowledge that doesn't make any difference because for lack of execution, for lack of intelligent capital, for lack of the right combination about how do I make things happen, where do I get the resources to finance it, to implement it. So,
what's the future for you personally? What's next after all these achievements?
Okay, I consider myself sort of extremely lucky. And I think what's really important to me in the next stages of my life, I think, is a few things. First of all, you know, being able to start a family, I think that's important. And then the second thing is going to be about really sort of building businesses, but building businesses in a way in which I can really work with other young people, other young Africans to make things happen.
Politics? Any future in politics?
I don't think about it as politics. I think more about it as public service. And I really believe that we don't necessarily have to be, quote unquote, in politics to participate in public service. So, and it's something that, to a certain extent, I feel like I've been involved in public service through the work that I do. I think it's something that I intend to continue. And yeah, I mean, it would be really good to kind of find ways to kind of work with young people and make them really want to contribute to making sure that our countries like work better.
Regrets? Anything? If you were asked or told you could start it all again, you could do it all again with the benefit of your experiences now, what would you do differently, if anything?
I'm not sure I would really do anything
Maybe
differently.
pick a warmer place to go to university, but other than that...
No. I think, you know, it worked well. I mean, you know, so I think so far, honestly, I've considered myself really, really fortunate. You know, sometimes I just wish that a lot more people had, like, the kind of opportunities that I really had in my life. And so one thing that really matters to me is to make sure that I can create such opportunities for other people.
Eric, the show's called The Scoop.
Yeah.
I asked my guests, give me something about you that very few people know, if anyone.
Okay, so when I was in Canada, I tried to learn how to ski.
And Africans on skis is not a natural order of things.
Well, so the one thing I learned was that I could actually move, and on slopes I could go pretty fast, but I couldn't brake.
You couldn't stop.
I couldn't stop. When you are my size, imagine seeing like
I don't have to imagine. I've done it because I went to university in Vancouver for 4 years. I've done exactly the same thing as you, but keep going.
So then, actually, when I was in Vancouver to learn English, I went to Whistler.
Yes.
And I was the only person that these guys insisted should come back sitting on those lifts. Because they were afraid I was going to break something, kill someone, just out of not being able to break. So here you have it. That's the scoop.
And that is the scoop with Eric Kakou. Join me again next week when we'll be talking to yet another great African personality. From me and the entire team of The Scoop here at the Serena Hotel in Kigali, Rwanda, thanks for watching. Eric, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
It was a fascinating discussion. No, it was a fascinating discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and thanks for being with us.
Thank you again.